The group text came in at 6:42 p.m. on a Wednesday night, sandwiched between an automated email about my gas bill and a reminder from the pharmacy that my prescription was ready. It was from my father. A brunch invitation. Sunday. Waterfront Estate Clubhouse. Casual dress. His message read, "Let's celebrate a new chapter. Everyone's invited. Bring your appetite." There was no mention of my mother. No acknowledgement of the fact that she had passed just 8 weeks earlier. "No, I hope you're holding up, sweetheart." Just a calendar link and 2 emojis, a champagne bottle and a sunrise. Rowena, my sister, was the first to respond. 3 heart emojis. "Can't wait." Valora, my father's friend, reacted to Rowena's message with a heart. Then another one to the brunch invite itself. She replied beneath it, "Looking forward to seeing everyone. It's going to be beautiful." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I locked the phone and placed it face down. I wasn't sure what part of me they expected would be hungry for brunch. For 3 nights, I debated. I stared at the text. I reread it, hoping there was some hidden tenderness I'd missed. But it stayed the same. Glossy, cheerful, impersonal. And yet, I knew I'd go. That old muscle memory of being the good daughter, the composed one, pulled stronger than my grief. After all, family shows up. Sunday morning, I stood in front of my closet for too long. I picked a slate gray blouse and slacks that had no personality. I didn't want to look sad, but I didn't want to look like I'd moved on either. I tied my hair back, no makeup, slid my mother's pearl earrings into my ears, and drove. The Waterfront Estate Clubhouse looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Ornate white railings, fresh-cut hedges, and string lights, even though it was 10 in the morning. Inside, everything smelled of citrus and bleach. A hostess greeted me by name. "They're already seated," she said, with a tone that suggested I was late to my own party. I walked into the main dining room, and time slowed just enough for me to absorb the scene. My father was laughing, full-bodied, head thrown back, seated at the center of a long, white-draped table. Rowena sat to his left, and on his right, Valora. She had one manicured hand resting lightly on his forearm. Her laugh trailed behind his like a rehearsed harmony. There were about 16 people at the table, cousins, in-laws, family friends. I hadn't even realized half of them were in town. My father saw me and waved me over, still smiling. "There she is. Come sit next to Valora." I hesitated. Someone scooted a chair out for me. I sat. The chair was too close to the corner, slightly off balance. A server filled my water glass. Another offered mimosas. I took one. Then my father stood. He lifted his glass. "I just want to take a moment," he said, his voice instantly commanding the room, "to acknowledge something beautiful. After all we've been through this year, I've learned that life doesn't wait, and love can come when you least expect it." I watched the people at the table nod. Some smiled. I kept my face still. "And so," he continued, "I'd like to introduce someone who has brought light back into my life. Everyone, meet my wife, Valora." There was a pause. Then clapping. Light? Polite. I didn't clap. I couldn't move. Wife. Not girlfriend. Not fiancé. Wife. My eyes flicked to Valora. She was glowing, clasping my father's hand, nodding graciously. Her left hand flashed a ring. Large, square-cut, nothing like my mother's band. No one else looked shocked, which meant I was the last to know. I raised my glass slowly, just high enough. A small nod, a smile that didn't touch my eyes. I took a sip and tasted nothing. I don't remember what came next. The food, the conversation, it blurred into noise. My body was present, but everything in me had gone quiet, because silence sometimes screams louder than any word. I was sitting across from the woman who now had my mother's seat, and no one had bothered to tell me. Valora reached for her champagne flute, and that's when I saw it. The watch, on her wrist, gleaming in the light. My mother's Cartier. I blinked. My mouth went dry. That watch was one of a kind. My father had given it to my mother on their 20th anniversary. She wore it to church, to dinner, to PTA meetings when Rowena and I were still in grade school. I remembered the feel of the cool gold against my fingers when I'd help her put it on before family parties. I remembered polishing it for her when she was too tired. That watch was not supposed to be on Vallora's wrist. My father had promised me we'd go through Mom's things together. That nothing would be touched until the time was right. "Oh," Vallora said, catching me looking. She smiled brightly. "Cordelia insisted I take it. He said it'd look beautiful on me. It's so classic, isn't it?" My smile didn't reach my eyes. "It is," I replied. Inside, my stomach turned. This wasn't just poor taste. This was invasion. I didn't confront her. There was no use. Not here. Not now. But I took another sip of my drink. Not because I was thirsty, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Brunch continued. Dishes came and went. Eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, avocado toast stacked like sculpture. I barely touched my plate. Laughter rose again, wrapping the room in warmth I couldn't feel. At some point, Vallora turned to me. "We should go shopping together sometime. Just us girls. Bonding time." I excused myself. No dramatic exits, no slammed doors. I said I had a deadline, a meeting, something vague enough to be believed and sharp enough to be respected. My father said, of course, we'll catch up later." His eyes never left his plate. Outside, the air was cool and damp. I walked to my car slowly, keys tight in my grip. Once inside, I shut the door and didn't start the engine. I sat there for 10 minutes, maybe longer. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared ahead, jaw clenched, the weight of everything pressing inward. They had moved on. Without her. Without me. And yet, I wasn't broken. I was collecting. Observing. Silence wasn't surrender. It was reconnaissance. 3 days after the brunch, a new email arrived. The subject line read, "Celebrating her life, a family gathering." I clicked it, expecting another chain of vague updates. But it wasn't vague this time. It was a flyer, full color, digital invitation. It was for a memorial in honor of my mother. Sunday afternoon, hosted at the Middleton Heritage House. Co-hosts listed Cordelia Jameson and Vallora Jameson. I stared at the screen. My name wasn't on the list. Not as a speaker, not as a daughter, not even in the email body. There was no RSVP request from me. It was like they had already decided. I didn't need to be included. I was already supposed to be there, quietly, somewhere in the background, blending in like a beige curtain. That Sunday, I dressed in simple black and pearl again. No makeup. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a seat in the back, where no one would ask me to move. The event was lavish. An outdoor tent surrounded by white roses, string lights, and classical music from a local quartet. Not my mother's style. She hated pretense. She preferred sunflowers and Motown. The irony wasn't lost on me. The ceremony began. Rowena stood up first and read a poem. Her voice cracked halfway through, which drew sympathetic murmurs from the crowd. Then came family friends, cousins, an old neighbor who called Mom the glue of the block. Then Vallora. She stood confidently at the podium, hands folded neatly over printed notes. Her dress was cream-colored, expensive, and soft against the backdrop of green hedges. Her voice had that practiced tremble. Barbara was the kind of woman who reminded us that grief isn't a wall, it's a door, she said. And through that door, we walk into new beginnings, carrying only the love that remains. I sat very still. She continued. I only knew Barbara for a short while, but she taught me the grace of letting go. She's why I can stand here, today, loving the family she left behind and helping them move forward. The audience nodded, some dabbed their eyes. I looked down at the memorial program they handed out at the entrance. There were bios, quotes, photos, none of me. In every picture, family vacations, holiday dinners, birthdays, either I was cropped out or simply missing. One shot showed my father, Rowena, and Vallora in a frame labeled Holiday 2021, The Core. I had been there that day. I had taken that photo. The cruelest erasure is not being forgotten. It's being deliberately removed. The memorial ended with the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which my mother openly despised. People clapped, they hugged, they complimented the event as they left. No one looked at me as I slipped out the side and into my car. I didn't drive home right away. I just sat. Later that evening, back in my kitchen, I made tea and opened my messages. Nothing from my father. Nothing from Rowena. No, thank you for coming. No, hope you're okay. Just silence. I stared at the last message I had sent in the family group chat 2 weeks earlier. Let me know if you need help planning anything for Mom's remembrance. No one had replied. I was scrolling absently when my niece walked into the room. She had come by with Rowena, who was still outside chatting with someone on the phone. Look, she said, holding out her phone. Aunt Valora made us a private group. It's called Core Family Chat. It's where we planned everything for today. I blinked. What? She nodded. Mom said not to show you, but I thought you'd want to see. She handed me the phone. The chat was dated back nearly a month. The members were my father, Valora, Rowena, and several of our cousins. They had shared memes, restaurant links, inside jokes, notes about floral arrangements, a spreadsheet titled Asset Overview, Phase 2. And there, in a message from Valora, let's keep this group focused on the real next chapter. We don't need distractions. Distractions. I gave the phone back with a smile and kissed my niece on the forehead. Thanks for showing me, sweetheart. You did the right thing. She nodded. I knew you'd be mad. I'm not mad, I lied. Just awake now. After they left, I opened my notebook. The one I had started after the funeral. Its front page was titled Observation Log. I wrote, January 18th, confirmed group chat exists. I'm not in it. Planning and decisions are being made without me. Distraction equals me. I underlined the date twice. Then I added another note. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way Valora had stood at that podium, claiming grace and new beginnings while wearing my mother's memory like borrowed silk. Around 2 a.m., I walked into the spare room and pulled out the chest of journals my mother had kept for 20 years. Some were travel logs, some were sermon notes, some were just dreams she never said aloud. I opened one at random. Page 15. They may forget who you are, but never forget who you came from. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't comfort. It was fire. I tried writing a letter to my father. I got 3 sentences in. Then I stopped. There was no point explaining pain to someone who traded your history for convenience. I returned to my notebook. Erased doesn't mean vanished. I'm still here. I see it all. And under it, I drew a small pen. Because if they were rewriting the story without me, it was time I held the pen. I had just finished reviewing grant applications when someone knocked at the office door. It wasn't loud, more like a hesitant tap, the kind a person gives when they're not sure if they're welcome. Through the glass panel, I saw a familiar silhouette, tall, slight, with a long wool coat pulled tightly against the chill. It was Mahola. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She had been my grandfather's closest friend for over 30 years, his chess partner on rainy days and confidant when business got heavy. I stood quickly, surprised. Mahola, I said, stepping toward the door. Is everything all right? She held out a small envelope, her hand trembling ever so slightly. This was meant for you, she said. From your grandfather. He gave it to me a few months before he passed. Told me to deliver it only if I felt it was time. Why now? I asked. She gave a sad smile. Because they're moving fast, and you're being left behind in the story. I nodded. No more questions. We didn't talk long. She didn't want tea. She didn't want to sit. She handed me the envelope and touched my arm gently. He trusted you, Alethea. He didn't trust many, not even your father. He told me, if something goes wrong, don't wait. She'll know what to do. I watched her walk away, coat flapping in the cold wind. Back inside, I stared at the envelope for a few minutes before opening it. It wasn't sealed with wax or ribbon, just Scotch tape folded over twice. Inside was a photo. A black and white snapshot of me at age 6, sitting on a beach towel next to my grandfather, both of us laughing, faces sun-warmed and real. And a letter, half-written, yellowed around the edges, the ink faded slightly from years of waiting. "My dear Letha," it began. "You were always the one who asked where the blueprints were, the one who wanted to know what every button did, what every screw was for. You saw things the rest of them only inherited. That's why I've changed the documents, everything, the villas, the land, the trust. It's in your name now. Not because I owe you, because I trust you to guard what we built." The next line was scratched out. Below it, another sentence started but stopped halfway. "If they try to take what I built for you," that's where the ink ended. I folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into a file folder labeled, "Do not open yet." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my living room barefoot, Harbor trailing behind me. The photo sat on my kitchen counter. I kept glancing at it, wondering what he would have written next, wondering if I even needed to see it to understand what he meant. 2 days later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. "Is this Alethea Jameson?" a man asked. "Yes." "This is Ronald Stetson with Coastal Banking. I'm calling on a matter flagged under our fraud prevention system. A power of attorney was submitted recently under your name, authorizing the sale of 2 of the Jameson villas." My stomach turned. "I didn't sign anything." "That's why I'm calling. We flagged the signature. It was too perfect. Our AI check raised a concern, and honestly, something about it didn't sit right. Would you like to see a scan?" "Yes," I said immediately. 10 minutes later, it arrived in my inbox. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but it wasn't mine. I remembered 2 weeks ago, at a family dinner, Valora had handed me a folder, asked me to review some foundation updates. She talked the whole time I skimmed, passed me a pen, just to check ink color, then took the folder back. I didn't sign anything then. At least I didn't think I did. They hadn't needed my real signature, just a scanned copy, or a trace. I sat still for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Jamela. "We've got movement," I said. "They're forging documents now." Jamela's voice was steady. "I've been expecting this. I'll pull the property histories and see what else they've touched." She paused. "You all right?" I exhaled. Angry, but clear. Before bed, I opened my observation log again. January 26th. Power of attorney filed under my name. Flagged by bank. Signature forged. Probably lifted from dinner. 2 weeks ago. Valora initiated conversation. Under that, I copied down a quote I'd once heard in a business law seminar. "People don't steal from the powerless. They steal from the ones they fear might take it back." I added a new tab to my document folder, in case they deny everything. I scanned the fake document, added it in, then the photo, then the half-letter from Grandpa. Evidence, not emotion. They thought they were writing me out. But I was building the record. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to keep the paper trail louder than their lies. Rowena's voicemail was short. Too short. "Hey, just a heads up. Dad's hoping to finalize some estate matters this week. Nothing big, just basic stuff. Hope you're good." No details, no time, no place, no follow-up text. I called her back within minutes, but it rang twice, then straight to voicemail. I waited an hour. Still nothing. The feeling in my stomach was too familiar, cold, sinking. I opened my laptop and checked the Family Foundation's shared calendar. That's when I saw it. Jameson Estate Planning Session. 3:00 p.m. Waterfront Boardroom. My name wasn't on the attendee list. I stared at it long enough to feel the anger settle into my bones. At 2:35, I was already in the car. I didn't bother with a call or a text. I knew exactly what this was. I had every right to be there. By the time I pulled into the clubhouse parking lot, I could already feel the performance happening inside. Smooth handshakes, Valora's curated charm, Cordelia's nods like he was still the patriarch everyone looked up to. The assistant at the front desk glanced up, then quickly looked down at her screen. She recognized me. She just didn't know how to respond. I opened the boardroom door at exactly 3:07. All eyes turned. Conversation froze mid-sentence. Vallora's hand hovered over a document she had been sliding toward my father. There were folders, charts. A digital presentation paused mid-slide with a pie chart showing villa income projections. Rowena looked down at her lap. No one said a word. I walked to the end of the table and looked up at the screen. In the corner of the chart, in small text, were my initials. AJ, Management Transition Planning. I let the silence grow for another 5 seconds. Then I placed my phone on the table, face up. Since this is just a prep discussion and not official, I said calmly, you won't mind if I record the rest. Just for my memory. Cordelia cleared his throat. Sweetheart, this wasn't meant to be formal. We didn't want to overwhelm you. Vallora smiled tightly. It's just logistical housekeeping. You've been handling so much. We thought this might be easier. I own the properties listed in slide 3, I said, the management of which seems to be up for discussion in a room I wasn't invited to. She didn't answer. I tapped my phone. Recording started. No one stopped me. After sitting through 20 minutes of deflected answers and vague phrasing, I stood, picked up one of the printed packets, and walked out. No dramatics, no slammed doors. Just facts. Back home, the silence didn't sting. It clarified. I opened the Foundation's archived materials, digital copies of press releases, annual reports, donor records. I'd worked on most of them myself over the last decade. Except now, they weren't there. Mentions of my mother had vanished, her name, her title as co-founder. Even photos, gone. The website homepage now read, The Cordelia Vallora Initiative, Building on Strength, Shaping the Future. There was no record of Barbara Jameson. I clicked deeper. In the footer metadata, the admin contact read, vallora.brand@jhrlegacy.com. I closed the browser. It wasn't just a matter of shifting management. It was systematic deletion. I emailed Jamela. Subject, erasure is theft too. Body. Attaching screenshots, confirming that history is being rewritten, not just mine, hers, need to escalate. I opened my notebook and started a new section, proof of origin. I printed out old newsletters that still bore Mom's quotes. I found board minutes from 2009 with her signature. I opened emails from former donors who had referred to her as the soul of the project. It was never just about money. It was about truth. Legacy. A few days later, I met with Mr. Dyer, a retired board member who'd always respected my mother. He looked at the altered Foundation website on my laptop, his brow furrowing. That's not right, he muttered. Barbara started this whole thing. Cordelia was the money. She was the mission. Would you be willing to write a statement? I asked. He nodded. Gladly. I left with 3 more signatures that week. Board members, donors, volunteers, each confirming what I already knew. They were rewriting the script, and they were cutting the lead out of her own story. By Friday, I had a packet the size of a phone book. Legal copies, annotated meeting summaries, scans of check stubs signed by my mother. I told Jamela, I want a formal hearing, on record. She raised an eyebrow. You understand what that means, right? Yes. It's war, Alethea. I met her gaze without flinching. It already was. I'm just the first one willing to say it. There was no fear left in me, only fuel. The next time they planned a meeting without me, they'd need a court summons to hold it. The photo came in a text message from my old high school friend Monica with just 3 words. Thought you'd want this. I opened it and stared. There was Vallora in a wide-brimmed sun hat, arm hooked around my father's elbow, both of them smiling against the backdrop of a white stucco villa with sweeping ocean views. One of our villas. One of my villas. The caption on her post read, We earned this. Some places just feel like home. Below it, hashtags, #legacy living, #family tradition, #Jameson strong. I stared at the screen for several seconds before even breathing. I knew that villa. I'd learned to surf there when I was 10. My grandfather taught me how to bait a crab trap on that very beach. My mother hosted her last birthday dinner on that porch, wearing that coral scarf she loved. That place wasn't just property, it was memory. And now it was content for Vallora's curated feed. She had replied to dozens of comments. This home has been in the family for generations. I feel her spirit here. So grateful to continue the legacy. Each line felt like a splinter under the skin. I didn't respond. I saved every screenshot, all the captions, all the comments, all the tags. I printed the main photo and pinned it to my wall beside the timeline of events I'd been building since the funeral. Under it, I wrote, "Delusion is loud. Ownership doesn't need to be." Then I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet. The next morning, I was eating breakfast when a call came in. Unknown number. Normally, I let those go to voicemail, but something nudged me to answer. Alethea Jameson? Yes. A man cleared his throat. You don't know me. I used to work with your father. This isn't something I should be doing, but I saw your name on a transaction last week. What kind of transaction? Refinancing. 2 of the coastal villas. Emergency liquidity plan, that's how it was labeled. But I've seen your signature before. That wasn't it. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. How did you see it? I'm still tied into a few back-end systems at Barrington Trust. I got a ping from an account I used to handle. I shouldn't be calling, but you need to look into file number 27462, account ending in 2191, February 6th entry. I appreciate this, I said quietly. I didn't see anything, he replied, and hung up. I didn't wait. I called Jamila and told her what I'd learned. Within hours, we confirmed it. My signature, again, was on record, authorizing movement of assets I hadn't even reviewed. Same fake, slightly altered stroke on the L, same spacing, still not mine. I opened my observation log and wrote, Feb 9, second forgery confirmed. Villa refinancing attempt via private bank. Contact anonymous but credible. Signature traced. Language used. Emergency liquidity. Intent equals fast liquidation before detection. Beneath it, I added a quote I remembered from a court case Jamila had once cited. They thought they could borrow the image of me, not knowing I'd come to collect the real thing. Then I drafted an email with the screenshots, the transaction log, and the photo of Vallora grinning in front of my family's legacy. Subject line, priority, fraud escalation. Jamila called the next day. They're moving fast, she said. Too fast. If you wait, it'll be locked before you blink. I closed the file folder slowly. Then we light our match. I opened a blank document and began typing. A formal notice of objection. A cease and desist on all active estate-related transactions, pending legal review. Then I emailed it to every estate board member. I CC'd the family group chat. The real one, not the secret side thread they thought I didn't know about. Not 2 hours later, Rowena texted me. Rowena, did you just throw a bomb into everything? I stared at it. Typed, deleted. Typed again. Then I replied, me. No. I just marked the line they can't cross again. I didn't expect a response. I didn't get one. That night, I sat on the porch, the same place Mom used to read on Sundays with her iced tea and gossip magazines. I brought out my tea and a manila envelope. Inside, a clean, notarized copy of Mom's original will, her real signature, her wishes in full ink. I laid it across my lap, feeling its weight. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her witness. As the sun sank over the water, I whispered aloud, just once. You don't get to rewrite me. The first time they tried to take something, I was polite. The second time, I'll be precise. It was just supposed to be a quick drive past the house. I wasn't even planning to stop. I had a meeting at the county records office in 20 minutes and was running ahead of schedule. But as I turned the corner onto Sycamore Lane, muscle memory guided my eyes toward the porch I'd memorized since childhood. The bench was still there. The ceramic planter my mother painted in '93 still held something green. The welcome mat was newer, different, but nothing remarkable. But Harbor wasn't there. Not lying in his usual spot near the hydrangeas, not pacing the walkway, not snoozing in the shade like he had every afternoon since Mom brought him home from the shelter 10 years ago. At first, I wondered if he was inside. Maybe the weather had gotten too chilly. Maybe he was sick. But then I saw her, Valora's assistant, Olivia, walking toward the gate with a metallic gift bag swinging from one hand and a pair of oversized sunglasses perched in her hair. I stepped out of my car, approached her casually. "Where's Harbor?" She blinked, lips parting in slow confusion. "Oh, right. The dog. They sent him away last week. Said he made the place feel old." That line hit harder than any insult could. It wasn't just the indifference in her voice. It was the fact that it wasn't even a decision she felt needed context. I swallowed, hard. "They gave him away?" "I think they dropped him at a rescue center. You'd have to ask them." I didn't need to. Back in my car, I pulled up the city's shelter locator and started making calls. The third one confirmed it. Yes, Harbor had been surrendered. Yes, by Cordelia. No, there was no medical issue, just couldn't care for him anymore. And yes, he was still there. Kennel 9. I drove like I was chasing something. Maybe I was. The moment I walked into the shelter and saw him, tail slow wagging in cautious hope, I knelt. His head nudged into my chest like he'd been waiting for me to appear in that exact moment. "I'm sorry," I whispered into his fur. "They took everything else. I didn't think they'd take you too." That night, Harbor slept at the foot of my bed. Not his usual blanket in the corner, not a dog bed, my bed. Because trust is not something you rebuild with treats and time. It's presence. It's showing up after the damage is done. The next morning, I found a manila envelope in my mailbox. Return address, Barrington title deed. I opened it on the kitchen counter. Inside was a fully ratified contract for the sale of Villa 9, one of the smaller beachfront properties. Escrow opened, terms finalized, signatures confirmed. My signature stared back at me, except it wasn't mine. It was the same forgery used in the bank document, the one I'd flagged 2 weeks ago. Only this time, they didn't even bother to hide it. The same pixel alignment, the same slant. A copy-paste job passed off as legal. I took photos, emailed Jamela. "This one's worse," she said when we met that afternoon. "They're accelerating, trying to finalize before anything locks them down." "They're testing my silence," I said. "They're testing your limits," she corrected. "Then it's time we give them an answer." I stayed up most of the night preparing a cease and desist package, not just the form letter, everything. I included the original forged signature, overlay comparisons, the email from the bank officer, the unfiled clause from my grandfather's trust. I numbered every page, tagged them in color. In the morning, I wore navy, power color, hair pulled back, no jewelry, just clarity. I walked into the title office like I owned the building. Because on paper, I nearly did. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. "No, but you'll want to deliver this right now." I handed her the package, slid my business card on top. "If you file this sale," I said calmly, "you're participating in felony fraud. I'm giving you a chance to walk away clean." She blinked. A man in a blazer appeared from the side hallway, brows raised. "Is there a problem?" "Only if you ignore that envelope." I walked out without another word. Later that afternoon, Harbor curled at my feet while I sat at my desk. I opened a plastic storage bin labeled Mom 2013-2019 and pulled out her old tax folders. Business filings, donation records, all the receipts of her life, quietly cataloged. I scanned them one by one. Then I opened a new digital folder titled Fortress. Inside, I uploaded scans of deeds, photos of property construction, scans of architectural plans signed by my grandfather, annotated legal memos, my grandmother's journal notes, everything. I typed out a letter. "To anyone who believes I will fold. You erased our names. You edited our history. But you left behind the receipts, and paper doesn't forget." I printed 10 copies, bound them, placed each in a separate envelope. One went to each villa. One went to the board. One stayed on my desk. They wanted to erase me softly. I was about to show them what it feels like to be written in stone. Harbor's leash tugged gently in my hand as we walked the familiar gravel path toward my mother's grave. The sun filtered through bare oak branches, casting pale shadows on the frost-bitten grass. It had been a month since I reclaimed him from the shelter, and in that time, his silent companionship had become my anchor. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need explanations. He just stayed close. As we neared her plot, my steps slowed. The headstone still wasn't there, just the same temporary marker, plastic, crooked in the soil. The laminated name card was fading, one corner curling in on itself. The bouquet I'd left last time had withered. A tiny plastic flower someone else had added hung by a bent wire, spinning slightly in the breeze. I scanned the area, hoping maybe I'd missed something. Maybe the engraving had been delayed. Maybe it was being installed soon. But no. "Excuse me," I called to a man in a green jacket hauling a shovel over his shoulder. He approached slowly, adjusting his cap. "Morning, can I help you?" "This plot," I said, pointing. "Barbara Jameson. Has a headstone been ordered?" He checked a list on a clipboard. "Doesn't look like it, just says temporary requested. Says the order was declined." "Declined?" He squinted. "Yeah. Notes say, keep it simple. No permanent marker necessary. Signatures Cordelia Jameson." My mouth stayed shut, but my chest burned. I nodded politely, thanked him, and turned away before I could scream. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, Harbor at my feet, and pulled my mother's journals from the box beneath the stairs. I flipped through slowly until I found it, an entry dated April 3rd, 5 years ago. "Legacy is what you leave behind that cannot be resold." That night, I placed an online order, custom black marble, gold leaf lettering, 3 words. Matriarch, not to be erased, Barbara Lynn Jameson. 2 days later, Jamela called. "You need to come in," she said. "And there's something I need to show you, in person." I met her at a quiet law office off Broad Street. She led me into a private room, closed the door behind us, and laid a thick envelope on the table. "It's from your grandfather's attorney. Sealed until now." I opened it slowly. Inside were updated trust documents, stamped, notarized, dated, and a handwritten letter. "Letha, if you're reading this, then I assume things have played out just as I feared. I never wanted it to come to this, but I knew the bloodline wouldn't protect you. You've been the keeper of the truth long before any of them knew the word meant anything. So here it is. You are the sole trustee and beneficiary of the coastal estates. Not one, not some, all 9. This should only be activated if deception occurs. If you're reading this, I trust your judgment has confirmed what mine predicted." My hands trembled slightly as I folded the letter. Jamela was watching me, but not speaking yet. Giving me space. I looked up. "How fast can this be executed?" "It already has," she said. "The trust attorney filed it this morning. You are now, legally, entirely, the one in control." I swallowed. "And the power of attorney?" "Revoked. Retroactively. We're notifying the county clerk and title offices today." "What about the board?" "We'll issue a formal control change notice. You'll revoke all prior designates, including Cordelia, including Valora." There was a pause. She leaned forward. "Your grandfather built this system for a storm he hoped would never come, but he built it strong." I nodded once. "Good, because now I intend to use it." Later that evening, I returned to the family villa. It was quiet, no cars, no lights. I walked through the side door, keys in hand, title in my bag. I stepped into the library. The walls were lined with books I remembered. Hemingway, Baldwin, cookbooks that had never been used. But above the fireplace was a new addition, a framed photo of Valora, smiling, posed, artificial. I took it down. In the storage closet, behind the filing cabinet, I found the original architectural sketch, the one Grandpa had drawn by hand when the first villa was just a dream on paper. I hung it back on the wall. The lines weren't perfect. The ink had smudged in one corner, but it was real. Attached to the bottom of the sketch was a note I'd never noticed before. "If they try to rewrite the history, put the blueprints back where they belong." I stood in that room for a while, not as a visitor, not as an outsider, as the owner, the protector. Before I left, I wrote a short email to Cordelia. Subject: Meeting notice time, Friday, 2:00 p.m. Location: Villa Boardroom. Agenda: Formal control transition. Invitees: Entire family. Note: This time, everyone gets the same link. They thought I'd stay outside the house. They forgot I still hold the deed. And when they walked into that meeting, I made sure they sat exactly where they tried to hide me. The room smelled like polished wood and citrus cleaner. Soft music played in the background, the kind Valora liked to call elegant ambiance, except this time she hadn't chosen it. I had. The estate conference room was dressed to perfection: crisp white linen, fresh coffee, lemon-infused water, and folders stacked neatly at each chair. Exactly how she used to set things up, back when she thought this table belonged to her. But not today. At the far end of the table sat two name tags. One read, Cordelia Jameson. The other, Valora, guest. No title. Just that one word. As factual as it was final. They arrived late. Of course they did. Cordelia walked in first, trying to look casual in his gray blazer. Valora followed, her smile thin, a little less confident than usual. She scanned the table quickly, probably looking for her preferred seat. It wasn't there. I stood at the head of the table and gestured to their spots. Thank you for coming. We're here to review the realignment of legal and ethical stewardship. Cordelia pulled out his chair, started to speak. Not yet, I said, cutting gently but firmly. You're here as listeners today. Valora's lips twitched, like she wanted to object, but she sat. Rowena was already there, flipping through the packet in front of her like she wasn't sure whether to take notes or leave. I continued. The only documents being signed today are by me. Silence. Then I turned on the projector. What appeared wasn't a balance sheet. It wasn't a market forecast or property chart. It was Valora's Instagram feed. Slide by slide, I showed the photos, her in front of Villa 1 with the caption, "This home has been in my husband's family for generations." Another of her sipping wine on the balcony. Legacy is something you live in, not just talk about. I paused on a video clip where she walked the gardens, narrating how she and Cordelia had revived the spirit of the coastal estate. I let the room absorb it. None of this was approved, I said. None of this is true, and none of this will continue. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. Valora, this is a formal cease and desist. You are not authorized to use any imagery, branding, or representation of the Jameson properties for personal gain. As sole trustee, I've filed copyright protections on every visual asset related to these estates. She didn't reach for the envelope. She looked at Cordelia. He stared ahead, unmoving. Rowena cleared her throat. This is a little extreme, don't you think? I turned to her. Was it extreme when I was erased from the family archive? When Mom's name was deleted from the foundation? When I was cut out of meetings and decisions made in rooms I wasn't invited to? She had no answer. I walked to the table, slid the envelope in front of Valora. You can't edit history when someone else owns the original file. Valora's face flushed. She folded her arms. You're overreacting. No, I'm restoring. The final portion of the meeting was short. I passed out a one-page declaration. The new governance structure, effective immediately, removes both Cordelia and Valora from any and all decision-making roles in the Jameson estate and foundation. This is not punishment. This is accountability. Cordelia finally spoke. You think you've won something? No, I said. I think I've corrected something. Before closing the meeting, I stood at the head of the table once more. In 2 weeks, we'll hold a dedication ceremony at each of the 9 villas. They'll be named after the women who helped build them. Not just my mother, but the housekeepers, the gardeners, the volunteers. This legacy isn't just family, it's community. Valora stood abruptly. You don't have the right. I looked her dead in the eye. This isn't your platform anymore. She stayed standing, arms rigid at her sides, mouth pressed into a hard line. Cordelia remained seated, silent. Rowena lowered her gaze, folded the paper in front of her, and tucked it into her purse without a word. I gathered my notes slowly, giving them time to process the moment. Inside, I wasn't reveling. I wasn't cheering. Because this was never about proving I was stronger. It was about proving I'd always belonged at the head of this table. But power never leaves quietly. And neither did they. The courthouse hallway smelled of old carpet and sharpened pencils. My heels clicked against the tile with each step, echoing louder than I felt. Jamila walked beside me, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. We filed everything that morning. My grandfather's final trust documents, the amended clauses, and the full fraud report. It was official, public. The county clerk didn't say much, but she raised her eyebrows slightly when she read the names on the paperwork. She scanned the last page, then looked up at me. "Well," she said, "you've stirred something." "I'm not here to make noise," I replied, "just to let the facts speak." She nodded. "Then you'll want copies, certified ones." We walked out into sunlight, a stack of folders heavier than they should have been tucked beneath my arm. By noon, the filings had already hit the court's digital system, and as expected, legal blogs picked it up within hours. Charleston heiress files suit against father and stepmother in coastal property battle. Trust betrayed, family drama behind 9 luxury villas. I didn't post a word, didn't like, share, comment, but my phone buzzed every 15 minutes with new alerts. Jamila called that evening. "Don't respond to anything public, let the filings do the talking." "Any movement on the escrow?" She sighed. "Frozen. 2 deals suspended, both under dispute. They're going to panic." "I hope they do." She paused. "How are you holding up?" "I'm holding." I didn't sleep much that night. The adrenaline of exposure carries its own kind of fatigue. You think victory will feel like relief? But it doesn't. It just sharpens your edges. The next morning, Valora broke her silence. An Instagram story. A video. She was at Villa 2, curled up on a chaise lounge, teary-eyed. "All I ever wanted was family," she said. "I've done nothing wrong." Why would someone want to ruin the one thing that kept us together? She paused, dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. People will twist anything for money. I didn't say a word, but others did. By mid-afternoon, an article hit the Post and Courier. Forgery, falsehoods, and foundations. The paper trail behind Charleston's coastal estate dispute. It included images of forged signatures, timeline comparisons, and even quotes from former employees who confirmed manipulation of documents. A local journalist had followed the paper trail I laid out. The headline that stuck most came from an independent legal site. "The Handwriting of Power. Who really owns the coastline villas?" That evening, Valora was summoned to a court-ordered deposition. I sat at the back of the room, calm. Jamila was to my left, notepad open. Cordelia sat across the room, arms crossed, his foot tapping restlessly. Valora walked in wearing white. Always white, always the misunderstood widow in waiting. The notary, calm and direct, testified about the pattern of forged filings and the mismatch of signatures. Valora interrupted. "That's not possible," she said loudly. "You must be confused." The judge raised his hand. "Let the witness finish." She swayed slightly, eyes wide. Then, she collapsed, not fully, just enough to catch herself against the chair, gasp dramatically, and crumple forward. Gasps rippled through the room. The clerk rushed over with water. Jamila didn't move, neither did I. We waited. 10 minutes later, she was escorted out, tearful but composed enough to glance at the camera lenses waiting in the hallway. By the end of the day, the hashtag #ValoraFalls was trending. Screenshots of the courtroom scene, side by side with her beach photos, were everywhere. Public sympathy had flipped. But I didn't smile. "This isn't vengeance," I whispered to myself. "It's clarity." That night, around 11:14 p.m., my phone rang, Rowena. I stared at the screen before answering. "Did you really need to go this far?" she asked, voice soft. I waited. "Did they?" I said. She exhaled slowly. "I didn't know it got this deep. I thought you were just being difficult." I let the silence hang for a beat. "Because you never asked," I said. "You never once asked what I was carrying." She didn't reply. I didn't need her to. After we hung up, I checked my email. There, buried between legal newsletters and real estate listings, was a message from my firm's contact form. No name. Just a line. Thank you for fighting. My mom was in the same position years ago, but didn't have your strength. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and looked out the window at the sea. For the first time in months, I breathed deep. But even in victory, some debts come due, not in court, but in the mirror. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the overhead lights and the distant clatter of coffee cups from the catering table. I stood behind the podium at the press event, clutching a leather-bound copy of The Final Trust and a worn photo of Grandpa and me standing in front of the first villa. His arm wrapped tight around my shoulder, sun glaring behind us, both of us squinting and laughing. My breath was even, my voice steady. This isn't just about real estate, I began. It's about story, about names nearly scrubbed from memory, and women whose legacies were papered over to fit someone else's version of the past. A few reporters lifted their pens. This is about what happens when people assume silence means surrender, about how some inherit titles and some inherit responsibility. A pause. Eyes on me now. I didn't ask for a battle. I asked for honesty. But when none came, I stood up not just for my mother, but for anyone who's ever been quietly written out. I scanned the room. Local media, community members, a few distant relatives sitting stiffly near the back, pretending this wasn't personal. Today, we dedicate a new bench outside the main villa. It bears my mother's name, Barbara Lynn Jameson, because she earned more than silence. She earned permanence. The applause wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Reporters rushed forward afterward. I kept answers short. No dramatics, no vengeance in my voice. Later, headlines rolled in. The daughter who fought back. Trust, truth, and the woman who reclaimed both. And still, when I got home, all I heard was silence, not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that presses on your shoulders like consequence. I sat down, kicked off my heels, and opened my inbox. There it was. From cordelia.jameson@email.com. Subject: None. The body of the email read, I didn't think you'd go through with it. I underestimated what you inherited, not the properties. You. No greeting. No sign-off. Just those two sentences. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the blog post I'd been drafting for months. Title: Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. I wrote about how women are taught to be quiet, how silence is mistaken for obedience, when really it's calculation, a decision, a strategy. I spoke about Mom, about the weight of holding truth while others rewrite it. Then I hit publish. The responses came within the hour, hundreds, then thousands. My sister forwarded me this. My mother went through something just like this. We didn't fight. But because of you, maybe we will next time. I whispered to myself. Then I didn't do it alone. The next week, I visited all 9 villas. At each one, I left a note tucked somewhere quiet, in a drawer. Between pages of a guest book, under a stone. You don't belong to a name, you belong to a legacy. I met with the new board, preservationists, archivists, quiet fighters who believed in stewardship over spectacle. One of them asked, after all that, why step away now? I smiled. Because I never wanted control. I wanted the truth to win. And now it has. I handed over active management, kept my voting rights. That was enough. Back home, I gathered the thick binder, the case files, printed screenshots, letters, declarations, photos. I placed it in the safe, turned the key, and locked it. Then I poured a glass of water, stepped out onto the porch, and watched the ocean claim the horizon. The world kept spinning. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt finished. I don't need to own it all, I said aloud. I just needed them to know it was never theirs to steal. But even after the storm clears, not all silence is peaceful. The rain came before dawn, not loud, just a steady whisper against the porch rail, the kind that makes the whole house breathe slower. Harbor lifted his head when the first envelope slid under the front door. The flap made a soft rasp on wood. He trotted over, sniffed, then looked back at me like he'd done his part. I picked it up. The front was covered in crayon swirls, purple stars, a lopsided sun, my name, printed in careful block letters. Inside, a drawing. Me, in front of the main villa. Big smile. Keys in my hand. Above my head, in sky blue crayon, "You are the boss." There was a sticky note on the back, slanted handwriting, small. "Mom doesn't know I sent this, but I think you're brave." My throat tightened. Not the painful kind, the kind that reminds you your body knows when something matters. "Did you see who dropped it?" I asked Harbor. He wagged, not helpful. I sat at the kitchen table and smoothed the paper with both palms. My niece loved crayons. I knew that from a stormy afternoon 3 years ago, when the power went out and Rowena had been stuck downtown. I sat with a flashlight and a dictionary while my niece asked how to spell inheritance, and then forever, and then cookie, just to even it out. We drew then, too. I taught her to shade a roof so it looked like the light came from somewhere. She showed me how a stick figure could look like it was running if you angled the lines right. We ate peanut butter with spoons and listened to rain. I pressed the drawing to my chest and kept it there until the paper warmed. Maybe legacy isn't just what you guard. Maybe it's what children notice when you think no one is looking. The quiet things, the kept promises, the doors you lock for the right reasons. I found a frame in the hall closet, brushed the dust off the glass with my sleeve, hung the drawing beside my desk, just above the ledger where I tracked repairs and grants and scheduled dedications. When I stepped back, the wall felt different, less like a timeline, more like a home. Mid-morning, there was a knock I recognized, Rowena's. Light, hesitant, 2 taps, silence, 1 more. I opened the door. She stood on the porch like a guest who wasn't sure she had the right house. Hands empty, coat wrinkled from being held too long, eyes that looked like she hadn't slept much. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Tea?" I offered. She nodded. In the kitchen, I set 2 mugs on the counter. The kettle sang. Neither of us moved to quiet it right away. "I didn't think they'd drag it that far," she said finally. I poured. "And I didn't think silence would cost me so much." She looked at the drawing on the wall. "She made that?" "She did." "She has good instincts," Rowena whispered. Then, she touched the sticky note without taking it down. "She also has poor timing. She gets that from all of us." We sat at the small table by the window. We didn't stare each other down. We didn't reach across for hands, we just held mugs and named what we could. "I kept telling myself you were overreacting," she said, "that you were making this harder than it had to be." "I know." My voice was even, not unkind, just true. "I didn't see the forged documents," she said. "I saw a sister who likes control." "You saw what was easiest to live with." She flinched, not from the words, from the mirror they held up. "I'm not here to defend them," she added. "Not anymore." "I'm not here to punish you," I said. She looked at me. "What are you here for?" "To finish what Mom started, and to make sure her name is still where it belongs." We drank our tea. Outside, the rain softened to a mist. Cars hissed past the house. Somewhere, a delivery truck beeped while backing up, then went quiet. "You know," Rowena said, tapping the rim of her cup, "Dad always told me I was the practical one, that I understood how the world works. But I think maybe you do. Just not in his language." I held her gaze, then looked down at the table. The wood grain curled like small rivers, small maps. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I said. "I'm asking you to stop in the doorway and ask who's actually inside the room." She nodded. "I can do that." We finished our tea. No apologies, no speeches, not even a hug. We walked to the door together and stood in that long, ordinary pause people confuse with awkwardness. It wasn't. It was space. "Tell her I liked the drawing," I said. "I will," Rowena replied, then, after a beat. "And I'll tell her you earned the keys." When the door closed, the house felt cleaner, as if we'd opened 2 windows at once. In the afternoon, I put on my raincoat and walked toward the corner, then down to Meeting Street. Harbor stayed home, asleep with his chin on my old running shoes. Everything smelled like wet oak and coffee. I stopped at the cafe where Mom used to sit on Sundays, the same table near the window. The same milky light. I ordered a small black coffee and, out of habit, asked for a lemon bar I didn't need. The cashier smiled like all good cashiers do when a person knows exactly what they want. At the table, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd carried through hearings and hospital waiting rooms and quiet victory rides back from the courthouse. I wrote, I was erased. I was minimized. But I wasn't defeated. I rebuilt myself in the very silence they thought would break me. I tapped the pen against the paper, listened to the low thrum of conversation around me. A couple argued in gentle voices about paint colors. A man in a blue jacket read a newspaper like the internet had never existed. The barista laughed. It sounded like metal spoons in a drawer. I wrote again. Being uninvited made space for a better table. My name doesn't need to sit under anyone else's shadow. A notification buzzed. I turned the phone face up. News alert. Villora steps down from 2 nonprofit boards amid signature scandal. I watched the text fade from the screen. Then I put the phone face down. No smirk, no thrill, just a breath I hadn't known I was holding. The lemon bar tasted like it always had. Sweet, tart, reliable. On the way home, the sky broke into patches. Sunlight found the puddles and turned them silver. The neighborhood kids had their scooters out, weaving around each other with a grace adults forget they once had. A woman clipped roses from her yard with small, determined snips and tucked them into a jar. A neighbor waved. I waved back. At home, I set my keys in the dish by the door. Harbor padded over, stretched, and leaned his weight against my leg. We stood there for a long minute, just people in a house being a house. I walked to the desk and looked up at the drawing again. You are the boss. Underneath, the frame cast a thin shadow across the wall. It looked like a line. I picked up my pen once more. Closure doesn't always knock. Sometimes you close the door yourself. I dated the page, smoothed the corner, closed the journal. The kettle hissed. I turned off the burner and let the steam dissipate. It was quiet without being empty. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with peace. And peace is the loudest legacy of all. The envelope was the color of old bone. Registered mail sticker half peeled at the corner. Harbor heard the mail slot click and gave a single bark, then trotted to the door, proud as a courier. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked it up. The sender's address was the same Charleston firm Grandpa had used for every real document that ever mattered. I set it on the table and ran a finger along the flap. Part of me wanted to wait, to brew tea, to make the house quiet enough for ceremony. But the other part, the one that had stood in courtrooms and boardrooms and kitchens with people who preferred the easy lie, was done waiting. I slid it open. Inside, a second envelope with a date written on the seal in black ink, 1 year before he died. My name. Below it, a title, written in Grandpa's block letters that never leaned left or right. If they ever try to take it from you. I breathed once, then broke the seal. The first page was a letter, no greeting this time. He knew who would be reading. I've seen good people convince themselves they're owed what they didn't build, he wrote. They will claim love, tradition, need, and the vague right of being the loudest in the room. When they do, you must be quieter and clearer than them. That is how a wall outlasts weather. He listed names, dates. The month he'd overheard Cordelia pitch a restructuring to a banker. The dinner when Villora had said, with that practiced softness, that women like Barbara cling to the past and make it hard for the future to breathe. He laid it all out, like measurements on a blueprint. The lines were straight, the edges clean. Then came the second document. A clause I had never seen. Not a flourish or a wish, but a lever. If 2 conditions were met, forgery and public deception, I had immediate litigation authority and an automatic freeze on all estate-related assets, retroactive to the date of the first falsified filing. All it needed was my signature and a filing stamp. He had left the signature line blank on purpose. I set the papers side by side. The house stilled. Even Harbor's breathing seemed to soften to make space. I drove to Jamella's office without calling first. She ushered me in, read the clause twice, then once more, lips moving, lawyer mind clicking like a safe. "Do you know what this does?" she asked. "Yes." "It ends the stalling. It ends the performance." She slid a pen across the table. I pressed my name into the line. The ink held like a hand. "You made me inherit more than land," I whispered to the page. "You made me inherit clarity." When I looked up, Jamella already had the filing sheet ready. "We'll walk it to the clerk," she said. "No courier, no delays." "I'll come." We left together. The air outside had that salt snap you get on a bright April afternoon. On the courthouse steps, I felt something inside me click into place. Not triumph, not relief. Alignment, like a door meeting a frame it was made for. Inside, the clerk glanced at the clause, then at me, then back at the clause. She didn't blink, she stamped it. The sound was small and absolute. The final hearing drew more people than I expected. Reporters, law students with notebooks, a row of retirees in pastel sweaters who came to every public proceeding the way other people go to matinees. I sat at the table with Jamella and our paralegal, the new trust packet in front of me like a finished map. Across the aisle, Cordelia kept his eyes on the judge's bench, jaw set so tight the muscle hopped. Valora wore gray, not white. She had learned something about optics. Maybe. The judge took the bench and the room rose. We sat. He was not a dramatic man. He read quickly, paused often, and asked for page numbers like a carpenter asking for tools. When he reached the clause, he adjusted his glasses, then read the conditions aloud. Forgery, public deception. He listed the dates, the filings, the testimonies. The room hummed with paper. Then he spoke the line that lifted the weight off my ribs. The court recognizes Ms. Alethea Jameson as sole trustee and beneficiary of the coastal estate assets, with retroactive control and authority as specified in the amended trust. There was a rustle, a collective exhale. Someone behind me whispered, "There it is." On the other side of the aisle, Valora stood. "This is character assassination," she said, voice sharp. "You can't erase—" "Ma'am," the bailiff warned. She took a step forward. "Ma'am?" She stopped. Her eyes flitted to the cameras, then to Cordelia, then to me. There was no feint this time, just fury without a stage. Cordelia did not stand. He looked at me, steady and unblinking. The man who taught me to tie my shoes and to parallel park and to pretend we had more money than we did when I was 8 stood very still. I did not look away. The judge continued. Given the documented pattern of forged instruments and misrepresentation, the court refers Ms. Valora Jameson and Mr. Cordelia Jameson to the solicitor's office for review of potential perjury and fraud. He tapped his pen once. We are adjourned. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Lights flashed, then settled. In the hallway, a reporter thrust a microphone toward me. What would you say to them now? I didn't have to think. Nothing, I said. They had years to listen. I'm speaking for the ones who were never heard. As we stepped into the sunlight, I remembered a line Grandpa used to say when he signed a building permit, his hand steady even when the wind pushed. Justice doesn't raise its voice. It stamps its name in ink. That evening, I drove to the villas without calling anyone. The workers had finished installing the brass plaque on the main wall the day before. I ran my fingers over the letters. These homes were built by hands that never wanted fame, only family. People had gathered for the community event under the oaks, gardeners in green caps, 2 former housekeepers who brought pound cake and sat together at the back, the high school drafting teacher who used to borrow Grandpa's old slide rules for his students, the town librarian who kept clippings of every charity event Mom ever organized. They didn't clap when I took the small portable microphone. They smiled. That was better. We're launching 2 scholarships, I said. One in my mother's name for young women in preservation, one in my grandfather's for any student who wants to learn how to make something stand. You don't have to be the loudest in the room, you just have to show up and do the work. A girl with an undercut and a shy grin asked how to apply. I told her to send me a paragraph about the strongest thing she's ever seen that can't be measured in numbers. She nodded like she knew exactly what she'd write. I stayed after the chairs were stacked and the last cookie disappeared. Dusk turned the porches lavender. Harbor trotted along the path, nose down, tail content. Back at the main house, I sat by the fireplace with the letter again. The last paragraph was short. If they come for what's yours, don't run, don't shout, just hold your name like the title it already is. I folded it along the crease, slid it back into the old envelope, and held the flap a second longer than I needed to, not because I doubted, because I wanted to seal something inside me, too. I stood, opened the fireplace screen, and placed the envelope on the grate. The match flared, then caught. Paper goes quick at first, then slow, then quick again. The ink curled into smoke. The edges lifted like wings and turned to lace, then nothing. It wasn't vengeance, it was completion. A line drawn with a full stop. Harbor put his head on my knee and sighed the way dogs do when they know a house has finished an argument with itself. I thought about every signature in this story, the forged ones, careless and smug, the official ones, sharp and careful, the old ones in blue ink that faded but never lied, and the one I gave today, firm, precise, my name in a hand that had learned patience the hard way. They tried to forge my signature, so I signed the end of their story instead. I stood, turned off the lamp, and let the moon do the work. The rooms looked different in that light, edges softer, corners honest. I walked to the door and locked it with the ease of a person who finally understands what a lock is for. Not all inheritances are about wealth. Some are about knowing when to end something, and knowing that doing so makes you whole.